One of the central points of dwarven culture is their reverence of Durin, and the legend of reincarnation that surrounds him. After Durin the Deathless, there were 6 more Durins throughout dwarven history, each one apparently a reincarnation of the first. But how exactly did this reincarnation work? In this video, you'll find the answer, and it might actually be surprising. So, the reincarnation of Durin is something that has already been dealt with in some adaptations. If you've been following Rings of Power at all, you might notice that there appears to be 2 Durins in the show, Durin III and Durin IV. This has been a contentious topic, and apart from a few fan theories, we know little of how it will work other than the fact that the showrunners have said that it's a storyline that will be addressed. Another adaptation has taken place in Lord of the Rings Online. The recently completed Legacy of Durin storyline follows Durin VII and an army of dwarves as he attempts to retake Gundabad. A central part of that story is Durin attempting to live up to his name and ultimately being revealed as a true reincarnation of Durin the Deathless as he begins to have memories of his past lives. It's also revealed that not all dwarves named Durin go on to be the real deal. What these two adaptations have in common, at least from what we know so far, is that Durin is physically reborn each time, to an entirely new mother and father, and that at some point in his life he becomes a reincarnation of Durin the Deathless, whether through physical appearances, character traits, legendary deeds, or retention of memories from a past life. The idea of Durin being physically reborn isn't a baseless idea, and it actually has some fairly strong textual support straight from the appendices of The Lord of the Rings. There he lived so long that he was known far and wide as Durin the Deathless, yet in the end he died before the Elder Days had passed, and his tomb was in Khazad-dûm. But his line never failed, and 5 times an heir was born in his house, so like to his forefather that he received the name of Durin. He was indeed held by the dwarves to be the Deathless that had returned, for many have strange tales and beliefs concerning themselves and their fate in the world. This seems fairly case closed, right? Well, wrong. Tolkien's Legendarium was a constant work in progress, and he changed many things about it, especially in the last 15 years of his life. Many of these changes were never completed in their scope, nor did they make it into published works such as The Lord of the Rings and The Silmarillion, but they were eventually published in the History of Middle-earth volumes, and in Chapter 13 of the Peoples of Middle-earth, called The Last Writings, Tolkien touched on the reincarnation of Durin once again, and he changed it. The dwarves add that at that time, Aule gained them also this privilege that distinguished them from elves and men, that the spirit of each of the fathers, such as Durin, should, at the end of the long span of life allotted to dwarves, fall asleep but then lie in a tomb of his own body, at rest, and there its weariness and any hurts that had befallen it should be amended. Then, after long years, he should arise and take up his kingship again. A very similar passage appears in Nature of Middle-earth. Here it may be said, however, that the reappearance at long intervals of the person of one of the dwarf fathers in the line of their kings, especially Durin, is not, when examined, probably one of rebirth, but of the preservation of the body of a former King Durin, to which at intervals his spirit would return. So in other words, there was no physical rebirth of Durin. Each Durin was the same person, with the same body. Upon death, that body would be placed in a tomb where it would be healed of all hurts and weariness, and then at some point in time, Durin would awake and become king again. So basically, Durin was somewhat similar to a zombie. This ability was not exclusive to Durin, and the fathers of the 6 other dwarven clans would experience similar reincarnations. This is in line with changes that Tolkien made to elves as well. At one point, Tolkien was considering that when elves were reincarnated in Valinor, they would be reborn in a new body to new parents, and would regain their memories over time. However, he recognised that there were some major and rather comical problems with this. One such problem being that an elf who was reincarnated, such as Finrod, would now have 2 sets of parents, and would technically be older than his new parents. His parents would also have to deal with the fact that their son is scarred from being brutally killed in a past life. In the end, he settled on giving the Vala the ability to reconstruct the body of a dead elf. But if Durin was just the same person reawakening at random intervals, then it raises some other questions. The first question I had when I learned this was, hold on, What if there is already a king and an heir? Do they just get passed over in favour of zombie Durin? But as it turns out, Tolkien already asked this question himself and proceeded to answer it in a note below the aforementioned text. What effect would this have on the succession? Probably this return would only occur when by some chance or other the reigning king had no son. The dwarves were very unprolific, and this no doubt happened fairly often. So Durin's reawakening would not happen at completely random intervals, and would instead happen at a time when required, such as when the king had no heir. This means that Durin's line restarted on 6 different occasions. A king would have no heir, Durin would reawaken, and then begin a new line of kings. The family tree of Durin's folk that appears in the appendices would have been the 5th time that line had been restarted. Durin VI awoke, and the line was continued through his son Nain I. It would also mean that Durin VII was not a descendant of foreign Third Stonehelm. Another question I had was, what happened to Durin's body? There's no evidence of Durin the Deathless, nor all of his appearances down to Durin V dying violently, so we can assume that they were safely entombed, but we know that Durin VI was slain by a Balrog, and considering that Durin VII was prophesized, it makes you wonder what happened to the body. It's possible that it was retrieved, but given Khazad-dûm was abandoned the following year, it raises the question. Was the body left behind, or did the dwarves manage to take it with them? Given the fact that the dwarves would have been aware of the process, you would think the safety of Durin's body would be paramount. If it was taken with them, it would have been taken to Erebor, and then possibly to the Grey Mountains, where it could have also been left behind, but alternatively also returned to Erebor again. Given the suddenness and devastation of Smaug's attack on Erebor, it probably wasn't salvaged then, and remained in Erebor during the length of Smaug's occupation, but the dwarves did manage to take back Erebor, so it wouldn't have mattered in the long run. So, come the 4th Age, Durin could be entombed beneath Erebor, awaiting to wake for the 7th time. But what if Durin was left behind in Moria or even the Grey Mountains? Well, it creates a rather amusing scenario in my head, where Durin VII awakes only to find himself in a ruined hall with absolutely no one around, wondering, what the hell has happened? And then he would have to make the perilous journey out of his old home all the way to Erebor, wondering, what has happened during the last 1,000+ years? And the dwarves at Erebor would be met with the surprise of a lifetime when a dirty, tired dwarf who is confused about the date and his location rocks up from out of nowhere claiming to be Durin come again. All in all, the details of Durin's reincarnation is an interesting glimpse into Tolkien's mind. No matter how small or seemingly insignificant, nothing was safe from being rewritten during his latter years, even if it meant contradicting published work. And it also shows how wildly different versions of canon could be from one another, which is why I am against any idea of a one true canon when it comes to Tolkien's work. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it or at least found it interesting. To be honest, the details of Durin's reincarnation is something I relearned relatively recently. I'd either glossed over it or forgotten about it after I first read through Peoples of Middle-earth, so I decided to share it with everyone, and it's one of the few times I'm confident where most of the people watching will truly learn something completely new. Cheers, farewell, and remember, Durin proves that not all zombies are bad.